Part 16. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 151. Chapter 151 Drag. I wanted to use this reason to take Lucine out of the Lu family, but Liu refused to let him in at all. Lucine pursed her lips and nodded reluctantly. I want to say something to Leun. Please go out first. He looked at Lucine and then at Leun. Thought for a moment and said, then I'll wait outside for Monsieur. After the door closed, Leun pulled Lucine to sit down. Leun. Hush. Leun shook his head, pointed at the door, and made a mouth gesture. Walls have ears. Lucine nodded, thought for a while and said, how is the situation over there with Mrs. Lin? Don't worry too much. It only takes 2 days, but it won't delay much. Leun dipped his index finger into some tea and wrote on the table while talking. Think of a way, delay. Then what can I do, otherwise I will always feel bad. Malingering. If you feel sorry for me, you should make a good apology to Mrs. Lin later. Leun took out a pill from his waist and handed it to Lucine. After I leave, you have to eat well. Naturally, you have to be pretty as a bride. I see. Lucine put away the pills and smiled at Leun. There was a bit of gratitude in his eyes. Come on, I'm going to Mrs. Lin's place too, so I won't disturb you. Lucine stood up with Leun and walked to the door. When he opened the door, he saw that He was still standing at the door. Judging from his posture, he was quite close to the door. He saw the two of them and said with a smile, Sister, have you finished talking to Monsieur? I'll send Leun out. Let's get together. This time, he did not refuse, but followed closely behind the two of them and walked towards the gate of Liu's house. Leun said goodbye to Lucine, turned around and left with Kuliu and Liang Xin. Behind him, Lucine tightened his hands hanging on his sides. Sister, it's time for you to go back and rest. I want to see my mother. Lucine looked at He with a cold look. Even though she had known He's cold-bloodedness for a long time, Lucine was indescribably scared when something like this happened to her. Her half-brother regarded her marriage as a deal. Perhaps he felt that Lucine was not a threat at the moment, so he agreed to let her see Lu Mu. Lu Mu's yard. Lucine entered the house, met Lu Mu who was getting up from the bed, and hurried up. Mom, what are you going to do? I'll do it. Chiner, let's go. Liu's mother looked at Lucine for a while and then suddenly said something. Mother. Lucine's hand holding Liu's mother trembled slightly and shook her head. Mom, I won't leave. Chiner, I've heard everything that Suzian is not a good person. My mother didn't listen to you before and thought your father had found a good match for you. Now you want to marry such a person. Lu Mu's eyes were already red, but now they are even redder. Her voice was choked with sobs. Chiner, run away, how can I see you marry such a man? Lucine patted Lu Mu's back and comforted her. Mom, you are not in good health. Don't worry about me. You have a good rest. Don't worry, Chiner won't let you worry. After putting Liu's mother to sleep, Lucine sighed, got up and left. Back in the courtyard, Lucine only ate a few mouthfuls of dinner, and then ordered the food to be taken away because he had no appetite. Sitting on the couch, she took out the pills Leun had given her before. After looking at the white pill for a long time, Lucine took a deep breath and put the medicine into his mouth. Su's study room. Father Su and Suzian's faces were equally ugly. Who is that Mr. Wu? Dalong is really useless. He just walked over to someone and took the account book to him. Suzian was so angry that he wanted to slap the table. As soon as his hand touched the table, he took a deep breath. His hand was still wrapped in a bandage, and it really hurt when he touched the wound inside. Su's father was calmer than Suzian, thinking in his mind. Suddenly, he said, I think he is a young master. Dad, what do you mean? Susan has only read a few books, so I didn't understand Sue's father's meaning at all. This matter must be reported to Eunuch Luo immediately. Sue's father called his servants and quickly wrote a letter to be sent to the palace. The alley was dark. The messenger walked in a hurry and kept his head down. A dark shadow passed by. The messenger paused and looked around cautiously. But before he saw the person coming, he felt a chill on his neck and blood splattered out. Liu Yufeng searched out the letter on his body. Another man in black got some liquid on the messenger's body, and after a while, the body melted away. Liu Yufeng returned to Yulo with the letter. The person waiting for him on the first floor was the old man who entertained Suleun last time. Elder Wu Xian. Lu Feng clasped his hands in his fists and was extremely respectful when facing Elder Wu Xian. Elder Wu Xian took the letter and walked to the second floor with his hands behind his back. I checked Suleun, a legitimate daughter of the Ho family who came back from Jingzhou. Why did she get the attention of her master? I don't know what the prince is thinking. Entered the house. Elder Wu Xian opened the envelope, and there was only a simple line of words on it. If the account books are lost, there may be someone inside. The Su family is not stupid either. Elder Wu Xian burned the letter paper and wrote a new letter imitating Su's father's handwriting. There was a secret passage under the table, and the envelope was thrown into it. If we act early, it will definitely arouse Prince Yu's vigilance. Has master thought about it? Lu Feng didn't know how to answer, so he just said, Your Majesty asked me to put Miss Su's thoughts first in everything. Elder Wu Xian nodded clearly. In that case, let's take action. The next day, Dali Temple received a report letter from an unknown person. There are also several account books inside. This matter soon reached the ears of the emperor. Eunuch Wan walked into the palace in a hurry. Your Majesty, the minister of Dali Temple has something urgent to report. Let him in. Emperor Jianwen, who was sitting in front of the dragon chair handling government affairs, frowned and gave the order. Eunuch Wan exclaimed. After a while, the minister of Dali Temple walked in with windy steps. I pay my respects to the emperor. Long live the emperor! Long live the emperor! Get up, what's the matter? Back to the emperor, I received a report letter early in the morning, as well as several account books. The minister of Dali Temple handed the things to Eunuch Wan. After being inspected by Eunuch Wan, he handed them over to Emperor Jianwen for inspection. Emperor Jianwen's face looked okay at first, but as he looked down, his face became more and more ugly. At the end of the day, the letter in my hand was crumpled into a ball. Is this serious? Your Majesty, those account books are proof. Emperor Jianwen took a deep breath. Eunuch Wan, who was standing close, had long noticed Emperor Jianwen's anger. He couldn't help shaking his body, lowered his head, and did not dare to speak. I order you to investigate. Even the prince and his concubines will do the same. Yes. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 152. Chapter 152 Ambition. Gambling house. The boss is not good, the officers and soldiers are coming. The officers and soldiers broke in, scaring the gamblers into fleeing in panic. However, the officers and soldiers had already surrounded the gambling house, and no one could escape. Dalong came down with his men. When he saw the leading officers and soldiers, he hurriedly came forward and said, Sir, I wonder what happened. Are you mobilizing troops like this? Are you in charge of this gambling house? Yes, we are just trying to make a living. As he spoke, Dalong took out a bulging purse from his sleeve and wanted to quietly put it into the arms of the leading officer, but the other party pushed it away. The man said with a cold face, You want to bribe me? Come on, arrest all these people. Sir, please spare my life. The purse in Dalong's hand fell directly to the ground. The officers and soldiers swarmed forward and captured Dalong and the men behind him. The rest of the gamblers were also detained by officers and soldiers, waiting for identity verification. Check carefully, don't miss anything. The officers and soldiers conducted a large-scale search in the gambling house. Dalong looked at this scene, his whole body trembled, and sweat fell from his forehead. "Sir, we found a cellar." Hearing this, Dalong's face became paler and paler, and he could hardly stand still. Wu Guang glanced at Dalong and followed the officers and soldiers towards the cellar. Some officers and soldiers were carrying boxes out. Wu Guang stepped forward and opened a box. The gold and silver jewelry inside was dazzling. "How many boxes are there?" The officers and soldiers on the side also looked surprised. "Sir, there are nearly 10 boxes left." A small gambling shop actually hid so much gold, silver, and jewelry. Wu Guang picked up a piece of gold and glanced at it, suddenly certain. What is written on the bottom of the gold is the year name Jianwen. This is gold that comes from the treasury. Take them all away. Looking at the boxes piled up on the cart, Wu Guang took a deep breath. "I'm afraid things will change this time." The dragon and the thugs from the gambling shop were all taken away. As soon as the other unrelated gamblers saw the officers and soldiers leaving, they hurried out of the gambling house and did not dare to stay longer. The news spread quickly in the capital. After all, there were many people who saw the scene on the street. Sulayun was working on a painting of hundreds of birds facing the phoenix in the Lin mansion. When he heard the news, his eyes twinkled. The 2 account books she took from the gambling house alone may not lead to such a serious situation. I think the male protagonist also made some preparations for this. It seems that she owes the other party another debt. Zhao Chun Palace. Concubine Min was lying on the couch, with 2 maids kneeling on both sides, rubbing her shoulders and legs. Mother's concubine. King Yu walked in with an ugly expression. Hearing the sound, Concubine Min opened her eyes and straightened up when she saw her son's ugly face. She waved her hand, and the 2 maids got up and left. What happened? The gambling house was investigated. The who came in from outside the palace paused, and then quickly walked to the 2 of them. "Your Highness, is the information accurate?" "Eunuch Luo, I should ask you this, right?" Seeing the person coming, King Yu looked gloomy and asked. "Why are gambling houses being investigated?" Eunuch Luo quickly knelt down and said, "Your Highness, please calm down." Seeing this scene, Concubine Min coughed lightly and said, "Okay, Jin'er, why are you angry with Eunuch Luo?" Eunuch Luo gets up and talks. King Yu snorted coldly and sat down on the chair next to him. Seeing this, Mr. Luo said, "Thank you, Your Majesty." Just then he stood up. "Jin'er, what news have you heard?" "Concubine, you didn't know it in the palace, but people from Dali Temple outside are trying to arrest someone." "Why is Eunuch Luo not clear about this matter?" Concubine Min looked at Eunuch Luo and asked. Eunuch Luo frowned and thought for a while, then lowered his head and replied, "Mother, I really don't know about this matter, but if there is something going on in the gambling house, someone should send a letter." "You didn't receive the message?" Wang Yu stared at Eunuch Luo, as if he was doubting him. Eunuch Luo did not dare to hesitate. "Your Highness, my servant's heart towards your Empress and your Highness can be learned from heaven and earth. Who knows if it's true?" King Yu seemed to dislike Eunuch Luo very much, but due to Concubine Min's kindness, his attitude towards Eunuch Luo was neither cold nor indifferent. Since Concubine Min entered the palace, Eunuch Luo has been with Concubine Min. 23 years have passed now, and there seems to be something more mixed between the 2 than a master-servant relationship. Concubine Min glanced at Eunuch Luo, who quickly bent over and retreated. "Okay, Jin'er, it's just a gambling house. Just check it out. I just lost a little money, don't worry. Concubine Min doesn't think there's anything wrong with it." Eunuch Luo has always been rigorous in doing things. Even if Dali Temple goes to investigate, I'm afraid they won't be found. King Qiu was a little uneasy. The gambling house was investigated so suddenly that there was no news about it. He had to wonder if there was something inside that was causing trouble. Let Eunuch Luo investigate this matter. Concubine Min looked at King Yu's expression and asked softly, "Are you on the line with Lu Hong?" Hearing the word Lu Hong, King Yu's expression softened slightly. He nodded. Lu Hong's son Lu Huayuan is now under his son's section. That's good. Concubine Min looked satisfied. Lu Hong is now appreciated by His Majesty, and it will definitely be beneficial to have a good relationship with him. However, Xiao Shenjiao led the troops to the northwest. If he gets military honors, I'm afraid it will have an impact on you. Don't worry, concubine, even if you want to get military merit, it still depends on whether he can get it alive. Mother and son looked at each other with the same ambition in their eyes. Eunuch Luo hurriedly left Zhaochun Palace, walked to a remote location, and blew the whistle. A figure appeared quietly. "Go and check the gambling house." The figure nodded and then disappeared. Not a single sound was left. It's as if it never appeared. Eunuch Luo looked at the sky outside the palace wall and frowned tightly. It is not a trivial matter for a gambling den to be investigated. Is it possible that any prince is ready to take action? Dali Temple Dungeon. Dalong was held up, his body was covered with scars, it was obvious that he had been tortured. "I do not know anything." His voice also became weaker and weaker. At this time, the door was opened. "Grown-ups." Wu Guang, who was interrogating, saw the people coming in and quickly stood up to greet them. The minister of Dali Temple waved his hand. "What's the matter? This person is very tough talking and didn't ask anything." Wu Guang whispered. The minister of Dali Temple frowned and said, "Come here, my officer." "Yes." Wu Guang got out of the way and saw the Dali Temple minister walking up to Dalong and saying something in his ear. Dalong's expression immediately became panicked. His whole body was shaking non-stop, and his pupils were dilated a lot. "No, do not want. If you tell me exactly what you know, I may be able to intercede on your behalf." The minister of Dali Temple looked cold and took a few steps back in disgust. Dalong seemed to be still hesitating. After a moment, his lips trembled and his voice was very soft. I said it all. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 153. Chapter 153 Smallpox. There was a storm in the capital, and the Lu family was also in trouble. Early in the morning, when the servants came into the house to wait on her, they noticed something was wrong with Lu Qin. "My whole body was burning badly, my face was red, and there was a rash on my face. The doctor will come soon." As soon as he was diagnosed, his face changed drastically. "It's smallpox. Smallpox." The surrounding servants suddenly panicked. Liu's father and Lu He happened to hear this when they arrived, and they paused as they entered the house. The two of them stepped back a few steps in tacit agreement. "Seal up the yard." Lu He ordered to go down. The servants in the house were naturally not allowed to come out, and even the doctor could only stay in the house temporarily. Fortunately, there has been a cure for smallpox for a long time, so the doctor is not panicking. But the servants were confused. There are still people who want to break out. If someone wants to run away, once he is caught, he will be maimed and sold out. Lu He's expression was gloomy, and these words made everyone dare not have the slightest idea of escape. Isn't this a little too coincidental? Liu's father didn't know what he was thinking, and he came up with this idea for no reason. After all, Lu Qin had escaped before, and they hadn't found out who saved Lucien. Now he got smallpox inexplicably. It was too much of a coincidence. Louis had the same idea. After pondering for a moment, he asked the boy to call another doctor. When he learned that smallpox was to be diagnosed, the doctor was unwilling to go in. He stood outside the courtyard gate and refused. Oops! A cold light flashed, and a sharp blade was pressed against the doctor's neck. Louis raised the corners of his mouth slightly and looked at the doctor with a half-smile. "If you don't want to go in." "Young Master Lou, the sword has no eyes, I'll just go in." The doctor was trembling all over, and his lips turned white instantly. He walked into the house with empty feet. Soon, the doctor's diagnosis was made. It was indeed smallpox. The two doctors both said it was smallpox, but it was really just a coincidence. Louis played with the long sword in his hand, swinging the sword, which turned out to be a soft sword. He put the soft sword back to his waist and said coldly, "But she did get smallpox by chance. If she doesn't get better in 2 days, I'm afraid the Sue family won't let her get married." "What should we do?" Liu's father asked. Obviously, in the Liu family, Louis is the one in charge. Louis thought for a moment and chuckled, "What can we do? It's such a big matter, so naturally we need to have a good talk with Master Su." After receiving the news from the Liu family, Suzian paused while eating the pastries. He muttered, "Isn't it because the Liu family doesn't want to get married and they deliberately made an excuse?" He wiped the cake crumbs on his hands on the boy's body and stood up. As a result, the wound was affected, which made him whimper in pain. "Master, be careful." The boy quickly stretched out his hand to support Suzian. Suzian looked at the gauze all over his body and felt annoyed again. If he knew who drugged him, he would definitely entertain that person well. "Go to Liu's house." "Master, didn't I tell you not to go out these days?" The boy spoke cautiously. Suzian raised his leg and kicked the young man away. The young man was very skillful and rolled to the ground, then hurriedly sat up on his knees. "I'm going out, do you still want to stop me?" "The little ones don't dare." The boy lowered his head and saw Suzian's figure walking past. He quickly stood up and followed. Mr. Su said he couldn't go out, but the servants of the Su family dared to stop Suzian. Suzian was a bit more dignified and didn't walk down the street as struttingly as usual. After all, he wouldn't look good when he walked out like this. Hence, Suzian could hardly sit in the sedan calmly. The Su family's sedan was walking on the street, so naturally no one dared to mess with it. After a while, we arrived at Liu's house. Louis, who had received the news early, was waiting at the door and was stunned for a moment when he saw the sedan approaching. Why did Master Su sit in a sedan chair today? Louis understood clearly when he saw Suzian's figure getting off the sedan. With this look, it's no wonder that Master Su is no longer walking outside. Master Su. Louis stepped forward as if he hadn't seen him. Suzian's injuries were not serious at all. In addition, he wore thick winter clothes, so the only place where he could actually see the gauze was on his face. It's just that he was already fat, and the gauze was wrapped around him, making him look even fatter. "Liu, I heard that your sister is sick, I came to take a look." Suzian looked at Louis and didn't realize that he meant to laugh at him, so he nodded with satisfaction. He reached out and patted Louis on the back and said, "After your sister marries me, you will be my brother-in-law. Our family doesn't speak the same language, so don't lie to me on purpose." "Master Su, we are getting married, what did I lie to you for?" Facing Suzian, Louis's attitude was somewhat humble. But the disdain in those eyes was well hidden. "To be honest, my sister had smallpox." "Smallpox?" Suzian frowned, but there was gauze on his forehead. With this wrinkle, the gauze also wrinkled. He quickly took a few steps back. "You don't have one, do you?" "Master Su, don't worry, if I had it, how could I still be standing here? Lu He generously let Suzian look him over. The latter nodded in understanding, but still kept some distance from Lu He. Arrived at Lu Qin's yard. Seeing the decoration outside, Su Jian murmured in his heart, did Lu Qin really have smallpox? Of course he didn't dare to go in and take a look. If he really got it, wouldn't it be infected with him? What did the doctor say? Suzian looked at Liu He. Lu He looked troubled. There are 2 doctors who are treating my sister inside, but Master Su also knows that it is smallpox. Maybe it will take 2 days, but I'm afraid it won't be cured. Of course I know, Suzian snorted, she has smallpox, and I can't marry her before she recovers. Let's get married when she recovers. Everyone listens to Master Su. Lu He's flattering words greatly benefited Suzian. He was about to turn around and leave when he saw a window being pushed open, facing Lu Qin's rash-covered face. This time, Suzian no longer had any doubts. Lu Qin looks like that, and he wouldn't even believe it wasn't smallpox. Suzian shook his body, and for a moment it was difficult to connect Lu Qin with the appearance he had seen before. He actually didn't want to get married. Master Su, smallpox can be easily cured today, so you don't have to worry. When my sister is cured, our Lu family will definitely clean her up and send her to the Su family. Lu He seemed to regard Lu Qin as an object, without any sibling affection. For him, Lu Qin's only role is to seek benefits for him and the Lu family. You are very good at talking. I heard that you are going to participate in the spring festival. Suzian glanced at Lu He. He rarely met such an intelligent boy. Lu He smiled and replied, I'm not talented, I just want to try my luck. Don't worry, if you do well in the exam, our Su family will definitely arrange a good position for you when the time comes. Suzian said this and raised his head, feeling very proud. Lu He followed suit and said, then I'd like to thank young Master Su first. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 154. Chapter 154, Censor of the Metropolitan Procuratorate. Stepping out of the dungeon, the minister of Dali Temple slowly exhaled. Wu Guang beside him also looked like he had not yet recovered. Grown-ups. You come into the palace with me and take those boxes with you. Yes. Boxes filled with gold, silver, and jewelry were brought into the palace. The people in the palace were also aware of the battle. Yu Fu Hall. Physician Wu applied acupuncture to the 13th prince, stood up and said, the acupuncture method left by Miss Su is really useful. I only applied it to the 13th prince twice and it worked. Concubine Qin saw this and naturally understood that Dr. Wu was not exaggerating. Mother's concubine. The 13th prince stood up slowly, took a few deep breaths, and smiled on his face, my son feels much more comfortable. As long as it's useful. Concubine Qin touched the head of the 13th prince. Seeing that imperial physician Wu still had something to say, she ordered the maid to look after the 13th prince. After leaving the palace, Concubine Qin asked, is there anything inconvenient for Dr. Wu to say? Mother, do you still remember the Tianzi that Miss Su mentioned last time? But are you missing? Concubine Qin's eyes lit up and she looked at Dr. Wu anxiously. Physician Wu glanced at Concubine Qin and said solemnly, there is indeed news. Where? I heard that the leader of the Northwest Wanderers, Yu Hualin Khan, has one in his hands. Concubine Qin's face froze. Nowadays, the relationship between the homeless people in the Northwest and the Dacian dynasty is tense. It is definitely impossible to get Tianzi through peaceful means. She pursed her lips. Although the Holy One sent Xiao Shenjiao and Suye to the Northwest, the homeless people in the Northwest had been fighting against the Dacian dynasty for so many years without any results. What if it's the same this time? Can Liner wait until that time? Mother, It's good news that TNZ has been found, although it's difficult to get TNZ at the moment. Something unexpected may happen. I hope so. Concubine Qin sighed. Wei Ya came in a hurry from one side, obviously he had something to report. Seeing Wei Ya's expression, Dr. Wu didn't stay long and resigned. What's the matter? Concubine Qin looked at Wei Ya. Empress, I heard that something happened to Concubine Min. Concubine Min. Concubine Qin frowned. The relationship between the Min family and the Qin family was not good, but when Concubine Qin entered the palace, Concubine Min had already given birth to Prince Yu, so there was no need to compete with newcomers like them for favor. Therefore, there was no dispute between Concubine Qin and Concubine Min. Do you know what it is? It seems that eunuch Luo, who is beside Concubine Min, is relying on the casino outside the palace to accept bribes. He Concubine Qin sneered, eunuch Luo? Without Concubine Min's instructions, would eunuch Luo dare? No one in the palace knows that eunuch Luo is a good dog for Concubine Min. Zhao Chun Palace. Come here, arrest eunuch Luo. The minister of Dali Temple was ordered to arrest the person, so of course no one from Zhao Chun Palace dared to stop him. Concubine Min stood on one side and managed to calm down. Master Wang, is there a misunderstanding about this matter? Mother Concubine Min, if there is any misunderstanding, I will wait until my subordinates investigate to find out. Wang Ziyi didn't panic at all. He was following the emperor's order to arrest people, so there was no need to be afraid. Eunuch Luo was detained by several guards, and he shook his head at Concubine Min without leaving a trace. There is still room for change in this matter, but he cannot involve Concubine Min. Seeing this, Concubine Min took a deep breath and watched eunuch Luo being taken away. As soon as the minister of Dali Temple and others left, King Yu came back. Mother's concubine. Jin'er, what should we do now? Mother and concubine, please don't interfere in this matter. If there is really no other way, we can only blame everything on eunuch Luo. Concubine Min opened her eyes and her hands shook. Concubine, my son knows that eunuch Luo has been with you for a long time, but now, for the sake of the Min family and your son, you must not be soft-hearted. Wang Yu stared at Concubine Min closely, and then he breathed a sigh of relief after seeing the slightest hint of guilt in her eyes. Concubine Min looked at King Yu and said, I will do as you say in this matter. Is there any news from your grandfather? I came here to talk about this matter. The northwest side has made arrangements. Wang Yu took Concubine Min into the palace. Eunuch Luo was taken to Tianlao by Wang Ziyi. Eunuch Luo, I want to trouble you to stay here for a few days. Wang Ziyi nodded to Eunuch Luo and then left the cell. The jailer stepped forward and closed the cell door. Master Wang, won't you interrogate me? Eunuch Luo frowned slightly and took a step forward to approach the cell door. Why just lock him up? Eunuch Luo, your interrogation is not my responsibility. Wang Ziyi finished speaking and turned to leave. Looking at Wang Ziyi's leaving figure, Eunuch Luo became even more puzzled. If it weren't for Dali Temple to investigate, who else could be there? Imperial Study Room. Your Majesty, Mr. Lu is here. Eunuch Wan led Lu Hong into the royal study. Lu Hong knelt down, but his back was very straight. I will pay my respects to your Majesty. Lu Iking is here, get up quickly. Seeing Lu Hong, the smile on Emperor Jianwen's face became a little brighter. Lu Hong did not show off because of Emperor Jianwen's closeness. He bowed politely and stood up. I wonder what your Majesty has to say to me. I know that you are very smart. My father-in-law, please declare the decree. Yes. Eunuch Wan swept the dust away, opened the brocade cloth in his hand, and read, Lu Hong receives the order. I am here. Lu Hong knelt down again without any dissatisfaction. Eunuch Wan glanced at Lu Hong secretly and couldn't help but sigh. No wonder Lu Hong was appreciated by His Majesty. Your Majesty has decreed that Lu Hong, the magistrate of Suzhou, is courageous, diligent and responsible, and is deeply loved by the people of Suzhou. Therefore, he has been granted the title of Censor of the Metropolitan Procuratorate. He will take office today. I appreciate this. Thank you, Your Majesty, long live my Emperor. The expression on Lu Hong's face did not change at all as he took the imperial edict from Eunuch Wan. The humble minister must live up to His Majesty's appreciation. Okay, Emperor Jianwen raised his hand and clapped his hands. Master Lu, when you take office as a new official, I want to investigate you. This case will be investigated by you. Eunuch Wan handed the folding document to Lu Hong. Lu Hong reached out to take it and looked through it. Her face changed slightly. Soon, he bent down and said, I will definitely make this matter clear. Go, the minister of Dali Temple will also be there to assist you in this matter. Emperor Jianwen waved his hand. Wei Chen retires. Lu Hong slowly stepped back, then turned around and left the imperial study. Outside the imperial study room, Wang Xiaoyi was waiting for Lu Hong. Seeing his figure appear, Wang Xiaoyi came up to meet him. I've met Mr. Yushi. Master Wang, you're welcome. Let's go to Tianlao first. Master Lu, please come this way. The news that Lu Hong was appointed censor of the imperial procuratorate spread soon after. There were many congratulatory people outside the Su family's house. Su Changjing's face was full of smiles. Listening to the compliments of the ladies, she almost stopped laughing. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 155. Chapter 155 Help. When Mr. arrived at the main hall, Su Changjing was still talking to the ladies. A dazzling array of congratulatory gifts are piled in the main hall, making it difficult for people to take their eyes away. Changjing. Mrsu's face was pale, but there was no hint of joy. Su Changjing heard the sound and turned around to look. Mother. Mrsu, congratulations. Several ladies saw Mrsu and hurriedly came forward to congratulate her. Everyone, take all your things back. As soon as Madame Su said these words, everyone's expressions changed. Especially Su Changjing, who said quickly, Mom, why? Shut up, old Madame Su glared at Su Changjing, then looked at everyone with apologetic expressions on her face. My son-in-law has always been diligent and thrifty, but he has 3 children to raise. Changjing was also confused for a moment, and actually wanted to accept them. Everyone's gift, I am here to apologize to you all. What Mrsu said, Mr. Lu has now become the censor of the Metropolitan Procuratorate. It's good to have some things to decorate the appearance. Have a smart reaction. After all, Lu Hong has just taken up his new post, and he has received so many congratulatory gifts. He is afraid that someone will catch him. Mrsu did not waver at all and asked her servants to take back all the congratulatory gifts one by one. If you really want to celebrate, the Lu family will move to a new house in a few days. I hope you can give it a try and come and get together. This is nature, this is nature. Seeing this, the ladies took back the congratulatory gifts and expressed in unison that they would give him face. When all the guests in the main hall had left, Su Changjing looked at Mrsu with a puzzled expression. Mom, what are you doing? You are confused. Madame Su shook her head helplessly, with a look of hatred on her face. You accepted the congratulatory gifts from these people just after Lu Hong took office. Do you think Lu Hong got the official position too soon? Mom, isn't this okay? Su Changjing still didn't understand, but seeing Mrsu's anger, she asked cautiously. Mrsu nodded her forehead and said, you have become the royal censor's wife now. It seems that my mother will teach you well. As soon as Shenji passed, Suleun put down the needle and thread in his hand and rubbed his sore wrist. He tidied up the sewing in front of him and stood up from his position. She was the only one left in the embroidery room at this time. Quilayo is standing outside the door waiting. Miss. Seeing Sulayun coming out, Quilayo put a coat on her. At this time, snow was falling outside the house, and the green willows opened their umbrellas. The master and servant left the Lin mansion and walked to the Su family. As soon as we entered the Su mansion, we saw the servants being busy. Are there any guests coming? Quilayo guessed. Sulayun looked at the joy on the faces of the servants and stretched out his hand to stop the maid who was walking in front of him. What happened? Second miss. When the maid saw Sulayun, she was startled for a moment, then quickly realized, my uncle, he has been promoted. Sulayun's eyes flashed, and the imperial decree came down. Go to Huayro Pavilion first. Huayro Pavilion. Ignoring the snowflakes on his clothes, Sulayun hurriedly entered the house. Sun Gro was leaning on the table holding her shoe solace. When she saw her coming in, she put down what she was holding. Why are you in such a hurry? Looking at Sun Gro's expression, Sulayun asked, Mom, what's going on with my uncle? Your mother has been in the house all day, how could she not know about this? Sun Gro didn't change her mood much. But it's strange that the person who received the imperial edict didn't come back. I don't know why. Sulayun couldn't figure out the reason for the moment. While mother and daughter were thinking, Grandma Li came in. Madam, second young lady, the old lady calls you to go to the main hall, my uncle is back. Arrived at the main hall. Lu Hong was standing in front of Mrs. Su, listening to the teachings. The son-in-law will pay attention. Mom, everyone is here, please take a seat first. Su Changqing's face was full of smiles, and he looked proud. Su Changjing raised his eyes and looked at Sun Gro and Sulayun. Thinking of something, she clapped her hands and said, Brother, Yao and the others haven't come yet. As soon as these words came out, Mrs. Su's expression changed. Su Changqing also showed a bit of embarrassment. This banquet. Brother, Yao is Lu Hong's cousin, so she can naturally attend this banquet. Is it possible that my sister-in-law is unwilling? Sun Gro clearly didn't say a word, but Su Changjing insisted on involving her. It's clear that it was done on purpose. The people present who knew the truth all showed strange expressions after hearing Su Changjing's words. Only Sun Gro and Sulayun looked calm. My aunt is really strange. She always feels that mother and Mrs. Wen don't get along. But Mrs. Wen is not the aunt of the family, and she has nothing to do with father. Why should mother embarrass her? Sulayun pretended to be puzzled and looked at Su Changjing, saying childish talk. But he could guess the relationship between the two. Su Changqing glared at Su Changjing, you are just talking nonsense. Your sister-in-law is not like that. Madam, Changjing has always been outspoken. Don't take it to heart. Don't worry, Mr. Ho, Changjing has said this kind of nonsense not once or twice. If I get angry with her every time, wouldn't I be tiring myself out? Sun Gro smiled and pulled Sulayun to sit down. It's just that the gun and the stick made Su Changjing look ugly. Everyone is here, but we are late. Wen Yao led Su Changzhong and Su Yuqing into the main hall. The three of them were all dressed brightly, as if they were attending a palace banquet instead of a family banquet. When she got closer, Wen Yao noticed the awkward atmosphere. She frowned slightly, her eyes flashed, and she said, Cousin, this is a gift to celebrate your promotion. It's a little thoughtful. I hope you won't dislike it. Knowing Wen Yao's identity, Lu Hong didn't feel the slightest bit uncomfortable when facing her. Thank you very much, Cousin Wen. The conversation between the two broke the awkward atmosphere. Mrs. Su took her seat, everyone also sat down one by one, and the family banquet began. When everyone is seated, the family banquet begins. This was to celebrate the promotion, but there was not much joy at the dinner table. Only the sound of dishes and chopsticks can be heard. Changing, are things in the new house okay? Mrs. spoke. Su Changing replied, Mom, it's almost done. We'll just wait until we clean it up and find an auspicious day to move over. Is the date determined? I have calculated it with the master before and said that 6 days will be a good day. Seeing that she had made all the arrangements, Mrs. nodded with satisfaction. Su Changing showed a slightly embarrassed look. Mom, there is one more thing. In Suzhou, we rarely prepared such banquets before, and Shuiying and the others are not able to help. I wonder if I can ask my sister-in-law to help me? Mrs. looked at Sun Gro and said, Gro, you are fine these days, so just help Changing. Before Sun Gro could speak, Suleun spoke first. Mom, you said you had a headache before, are you feeling better now? End of this chapter. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 156. Chapter 156. The Su family was arrested. Sun Gro met Suleun's worried eyes and thought. She raised her hand and rubbed her forehead, showing a bit of fatigue. I felt better after taking medicine before, but now I feel uncomfortable walking around. After saying that, she looked at Mrs. and Su Changing, and smiled apologetically. I'm afraid I won't be able to help Changing in this way. Su Changing curled her lips and said, forget it, otherwise it would be bad if something happens to my sister-in-law. Since you have a headache, just rest. Mrs. also spoke up and did not ask Sun Gro to help. Seeing this, Suleun breathed a sigh of relief. She has not forgotten that in her last life, Su Changing also asked her mother to help, but something went wrong at the banquet, and her mother was pushed out by Su Changing and used as a shield. Halfway through the meal, Su Changing asked, seemingly unintentionally, brother-in-law, why did you come back so late after you went to the palace to receive the order today? Your Majesty gave some instructions, but he didn't come back. Lu Hong's expression was calm and he didn't want to mention this matter. Su Changqing tentatively said, I heard that Dali Temple sent people to search a gambling house today, and it seems to have something to do with people in the palace. Since it's a matter of Dali Temple, I can't say much. In some aspects, Lu Hong is particularly ethical. Seeing that he couldn't answer the question, Su Changqing didn't ask any more, but his face didn't look very good. Now that Lu Hong has become the censor of the Metropolitan Procuratorate, he is still the one who has the upper hand when it comes to official positions. He usually cares about Lu Hong a lot, but now he only asks a few questions, but Lu Hong doesn't want to say more. Such a comparison, of course he would not be happy. But his status as a marquis was obtained through the Sun family. It is very difficult to climb up again. Thinking of this, Su Changqing's face softened and she looked at Sun Gro, Madam, I have neglected you these days. I will go to your yard after I finish my work. Sun Gro didn't want to see Su Changqing at all, but she didn't refuse directly. Then I'll prepare hot soup and wait for you. The family banquet is over. Suleun accompanied Sun Gro back to Huiro Pavilion. Mom, tonight. Don't worry, even if I want him to stay, I'm afraid someone will make trouble. The Yaomatzi mentioned by Sun Gro naturally refers to Wen Yao. I learned from the dinner table that Su Changqing was going to Sun Gro's yard, so Wen Yao couldn't help but do something. Not long after returning to the courtyard, someone came to deliver the news. At that time, Su Changqing had just arrived at the door of Huiro Pavilion. Before he could step through the door, he was stopped by the boy. Knowing that Wen Yao was not feeling well, Su Changqing only hesitated for a second, turned around and walked towards Sanjiao courtyard. Madam, the Marquis has left. Nanny Li brought hot soup into the room and informed Sun Gro of the situation. What should I do with this soup? It's hot in the kitchen. Sun Gro waved her hand. She had never cooked soup by herself since the last time she delivered soup from the study. No one in Su Mansion noticed Sun Gro's change. Suleun returned to Kaahwaziazu. Miss, there is news from Sun Wen that Miss Lu has smallpox. New. Quilio looked worried, but when she saw Suleun's calm expression, she was stunned for a moment. She reacted and asked, Miss, you already knew this. Just pretending to have smallpox, nothing will happen. Lu Qin chose to swallow the pill, and Suleun was indeed relieved. She was actually a little worried that Lu Qin would not be willing to do it according to her method. Fortunately, the other party listened to her. Lian Xian had already prepared hot water for bathing when Suleun came back. After taking a bath, Suleun felt much refreshed and went to the study to study medicinal materials. Even though she has only been studying medicine for half a year, she now has an excellent memory and has many prescriptions in her mind. The pills that were used previously were all developed by her. After counting the remaining pills, Suleun made some more antidote pills. That's when I went back to the house to sleep. Late night. Wang Xiaoyi led his people to surround the Su family. After a while, Su's father and Su Xian were arrested and sent to the prison together. In the prison, Su's father and Su Xian were imprisoned together. Coincidentally, the person in the cell opposite was Eunuch Luo. Father Su and Eunuch Luo looked at each other and looked away with a tacit understanding. Only Su Xian was stupid enough to almost call him Godfather, but luckily Su's father covered his mouth. In fact, the relationship between the three people is already known clearly even if they don't check it deliberately. Dad, what are you doing? Su Xian was pulled into the corner by Su's father, with a puzzled look on his face. But soon, he thought of something again. Dad, why is my godfather also in prison? How can he get us out if he is in prison? Stop talking now. Su's father only had a headache now. He didn't discipline Su Xian well on weekdays. Even Eunuch Luo was taken to the prison. Doesn't that mean that the things they do in daily life have been known to the emperor? When Father Su thought about this, his whole body trembled. As early as when he got online with Eunuch Luo, it wasn't that he hadn't thought about such a result, but he just didn't expect it would come so quickly. Dad. Su Xian looked at his father's suddenly pale face and felt increasingly uneasy. Hands on my body started to hurt again. After a while, the jailer opened the cell door and took Su's father and Su Xian out. At a fork, the two people did not walk together, but separated. Dad. Su Xian shouted in panic, but he was fat and was pressed by the jailer. He turned his head for a long time without turning around, and could not see his father at all. Father Su was calm and said loudly, Xian, we haven't done anything, don't worry. He still has some hope in his heart. Eunuch Luo is working for concubine Min and Prince Yu, and these two people may be able to rescue them. What Su's father didn't know was that the Su family was destined to be the abandoned one. As soon as Su Xian entered the interrogation room, his whole body became sluggish. Before even being punished, everyone he knew was punished. Su's father was a bit tougher. Wang Xiaoyi interrogated him personally, but he didn't find out much for a long time. Master Wang, Master Lu is here. Master Lu. Wang Xiaoyi looked at Lu Hong who came in. Lu Hong nodded and asked, how many did you ask? This person has a tough mouth and hasn't said anything yet. You go out and rest first, I'll come. Wang Xiaoyi had no doubts, put down the torture instrument in his hand, turned around and left. There were two jailers in the interrogation room. Lu Hong glanced at them and said, you guys should go out first. Yes. When the jailer left, only Su's father and Lu Hong were left in the interrogation room. Father Su reluctantly raised his head to look at the person coming, and let out a few dull coughs. Mr. Su, if you don't want anything to happen to your son, I'll have to deal with it alone. Lu Hong lowered his eyes and glanced across the blood stains on the ground. Hearing this, Father Su's eyes suddenly widened. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 157. Chapter 157 ends suddenly. Father Su's lips trembled slightly and he looked at Lu Hong in disbelief. He thought that this person was here to torture him again, but he didn't expect that the other person would say such things. Who are you? Su's father's voice was trembling and he asked questions cautiously. Lu Hong did not answer. He only glanced at him coldly and said, "You are going to die after all, why do you need to know my name? Who asked you to come?" Su's father had some thoughts in his mind. Wang Xiaoyi was the minister of Dali Temple. There were probably not many officials in the whole capital who could make the ministers of Dali Temple treat each other with courtesy. And there are even fewer people who can serve such people. Lu Hong could see what Su's father was thinking, and a dark color flashed across his eyes. "You don't have to guess, it's just a transaction." "Okay, I plead guilty." Father Su was silent for a long time, then slowly spoke. For the sake of his son, he must do this. "Sign and stamp." Lu Hong took the paper from the side, and the black words on it were extremely clear. Su's father had one of his hands untied and wrote his name on it tremblingly. Fingerprints were then printed. When Lu Hong stepped out of the prison, the sky outside was already dark. "Master Lu." Wang Xiaoyi looked at Lu Hong, who walked out of the prison cleanly, with a flash of surprise in his eyes. He thought Lu Hong would torture Su's father. But it seems not. "Master Wang, Su Ren has confessed his crime." Lu Hong handed over the confession written in black and white. "I am going to return His Majesty's orders. Master Wang, can you go with me?" Wang Xiaoyi frowned and felt that the speed was a bit fast. "Master Lu, please go ahead and I'll go in and take a look." "Please do it." Lu Hong nodded, and the raised arc at the corner of his mouth quickly disappeared. Seeing Lu Hong walking away, Wang Xiaoyi turned around and walked towards the interrogation room. "My lord, something is wrong, Su Ren committed suicide." The jailer ran over in a panic. Wang Xiaoyi frowned. As soon as he entered the interrogation room, he saw Su Ren being put down by the jailer. The tongue was cut off at the root, and it was obvious that he had no intention of living. "Clean up the people and have Su Xian put back in jail first." "Yes." Even when the jailer saw the severed tongue, he couldn't help but feel a chill running down his spine. How much force must have been used to crush all of his tongue? Wang Xiaoyi walked out of the prison with a gloomy expression. This was really fast, and he felt that something was wrong. But he didn't want to guess Lu Hong. First of all, Lu Hong was the censor of the Metropolitan Procuratorate who had just been appointed by the Holy Emperor. It would be too bold to be bribed for the first thing he did after taking office. Secondly, he had heard a lot about Lu Hong. In Suzhou, Lu Hong was a good official praised by everyone in Suzhou. Could it be that he would turn bad when he returned to the capital? Su Ren's body was carried out. Looking at the corpse, Wang Xiaoyi took a deep breath, turned around and walked towards the imperial study. The person is dead after all, and what happens now can only be decided by Lu Hong. Imperial study room. Emperor Jianwen was stunned when he heard that the matter had been found out. "Master Lu, are you telling the truth?" "Your Majesty, this is Su Ren's confession. I have also sent people to search Su's house. I believe that evidence will be found soon." Lu Hong lowered his head and said a lie without any panic. Even if it was the last thing he ever wanted to do. At this moment, his parents seemed to appear in front of him. They told Lu Hong that he should be a good official when he grows up. The corners of Lu Hong's eyes were slightly red, but no one saw it. Emperor Jianwen looked at Lu Hong for a while, then said, "Lu Iking, do you think what Su Ren said is credible? The minister only certifies the evidence, "But your Majesty, there are many doubts about this matter." "How to say? If eunuch Luo was really taking bribes privately, why did he come to the Su family? As eunuch Luo is Su Xian's godfather, how could others not think more about it if something like this happened?" Emperor Jianwen nodded thoughtfully. "Ai Qing, continue." "Master Wang, the minister of Dali Temple, has arrived. The humble minister pays homage to His Majesty." "Master Wang, please get up." "Thank you, Your Majesty." Wang Xiaoyi stood up, looked at Lu Hong, and then said to Emperor Jianwen, "Your Majesty, Su Ren committed suicide." "Suicide?" Emperor Jianwen frowned and asked, "Have you asked the imperial doctor to see it?" "Your Majesty," Su Ren bit off his tongue. Wang Xiaoyi's expression didn't change much when he said this. He has seen this kind of thing so many times that he has long lost his emotions. Needless to say, Emperor Jianwen was a one-time emperor, but when he was young, he went to the battlefield many times. "I have never seen any kind of death." Just hearing what Wang Xiaoyi said, a little doubt arose in my heart. Is it a bit of a coincidence that he committed suicide after confessing his crime? Lu Hong did not answer the question and allowed Emperor Jianwen's suspicious eyes to pass over him. His calmness actually made Emperor Jianwen less suspicious. "There will be an early morning court meeting in half an hour. Can Lu Iking send the book before the early morning court meeting?" Wei Chen tries his best. Emperor Jianwen nodded with some satisfaction. "In this case, you two adults should go back." "Early morning." Lu Hong handed over the written note. "Not only that, there is also evidence collected from the Su family. They are all small officials who paid a lot of money to the Su family for the sake of benefits. As for the gambling house, it is actually a money laundering den. Eunuch Luo was kept in the dark about the whole thing and didn't know anything about it. However, Emperor Jianwen still ordered Eunuch Luo to be punished. He had his legs broken and was sent out of the palace. In fact, it is also a warning to concubine Min. Emperor Jianwen didn't think the matter was really that simple, but he couldn't bear to investigate his son. What's more, King Yu always behaved like a filial son in front of Emperor Jianwen. Emperor Jianwen would only be more suspicious of concubine Min and the Min family, but was not very angry with King Yu. As for the Su family, all their money was confiscated. Members of the Su family, such as Su Xian and Su's mother, will be exiled. Hearing the fate of the Su family from Lai Yufeng's mouth, Su Leun was not only not happy, but also became uneasy. This matter ended too suddenly. "Lu Feng, you only handed over those 2 account books." Su Leun was not very involved in this incident. The only thing he had handled were the 2 account books. Of course she knew that the 2 account books alone would not be able to tell much, but at that time she thought that Xiao Shenjiao also had a handle, so she asked Lu Feng to come back to deal with the matter. Lai Yufeng's eyes were somewhat troubled. "Miss Su, please don't worry, the prince has arranged all this." Su Leun stared at Lai Yufeng for a while and then realized. In other words, the reason why Xiao Shenjiao took action was because he didn't want her to make the matter bigger. She felt a little uncomfortable. How could Su Leun feel relieved if King Yu was not frustrated? "What's the relationship between Yulo and your master?" Suddenly, such a sentence popped out from Su Leun's mouth. Lai Yufeng stiffened and looked at Su Leun with a look of surprise. How did Miss Su know? End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 158. Chapter 158. The Instigator. Lai Yufeng realized that his expression was wrong, but he wanted to take it back, but it was already too late. Su Leun saw Lu Feng's reaction in his eyes. He was just suspicious at first, but now he has realized it. That Yulo is really related to Xiao Shenjiao. She originally thought that Xiao Shenjiao sent someone to monitor her, but she asked Sun Wen to check, but there was no trace at all. If no one was monitoring her, How did Xiao Shenjiao know about this? After thinking for a long time, Sulayun could only put his doubts on Yulu. In my mind, the image of that dream flashed through my mind again. No wonder Xiao Shenjiao didn't die in his previous life. He has quite a few trump cards in his hand. Why pretend to be dead? Sulayun couldn't figure this out. Your master probably knows that I am checking King Yu. Seeing that Lai Yufeng didn't speak for a long time, Sulayun arrived slowly. Lai Yufeng smiled awkwardly. The prince said that Yulo will provide any information that Miss Su wants. The implication is that Yulo will not hide anything about King Yu from Sulayun. It can be said that I owe His Highness the King of Jin another favor. Sulayun said in a deep voice. But now that he discovered Xiao Shenjiao's strength, Sulayun couldn't think of what else he could do to help Xiao Shenjiao. Somebody is coming. Lu Feng calmed down and flew away. After a while, Sun Wen appeared. After the Lu family learned about the Su family's affairs, they had already sent people to break off the engagement. The Lu family is just a grassroots, they fall quickly. Sulayun felt sorry for Lu Qin. With Liu's father and Lu He here, even if Suzian is gone, there may be the next Zhongxian or Chenxian. In the end, they are treating the symptoms rather than the root cause. The servants who were looking after Lu Qin had left Lu Qin's house after confirming that he did not have smallpox. Both doctors were equally confused. Smallpox was highly contagious, but why, after several days, was Lu Qin the only one to get smallpox? Ahem, water. Lu Qin got up from the couch, and the maid next to her quickly brought some water. When he accidentally touched Lu Qin's hand, he was startled at first, but quickly recovered. The temperature of the young lady's body has dropped. The doctor quickly diagnosed Lu Qin and found that her internal condition was much better. Lu Qin realized that the effect of the medicine was about to wear off. She grabbed the maid and asked, "The Su family. Miss, you have been confused for a few days and you don't know that the Su family is gone. Your marriage to Suzian has also been cancelled." "Cancelled?" Lu Qin whispered, his eyes getting brighter and brighter. "Qiner." Liu's mother was getting better. When she heard that Lu Qin had smallpox, she couldn't stop her and came to Lu Qin's house. Lu Qin's eyes gradually turned red when she saw her mother. She knew that Sulayun would not harm her, but in the past few days, she clearly felt that death was approaching. Those symptoms of smallpox are all too real. Who made that pill to have such a powerful effect? "Qiner, how do you feel?" Lu Mu's anxious shout called Lu Qin out of her thoughts. Lu Qin met her mother's worried eyes, smiled at the corner of her mouth, and said comfortingly, "I feel better now, mother, don't worry, you will be fine soon. Mom, stay and take care of you." Lu Qin knew that he did not have smallpox and would not be infected. But Mother Lu didn't know. Seeing her mother's choice, Lu Qin's heart became more and more sour. She had been so confused these past few days that she even had some thoughts of suicide. Instead of marrying Suzian, it would be better for her to end it on her own and live in pain in the future. But she forgot that there was a mother who loved her so much. Liu's mother stayed in Lu Qin's house and took care of Lu Qin. Lu He and Liu's father knew about this, but did not stop it or pay attention to it. They were worried about something else now. Without the Su family, even if Liu He participated in the spring festival, he would not have enough financial resources to support it. If nothing happens sooner or later, nothing will happen later, but this is the time. Liu's father complained. Lu He was open-minded. "Father, if something happens after Lu Qin marries Suzian, it will not be a good thing for our Lu family." "You're right." Father Lu nodded in agreement. "What should I do if Chun Wei?" "Before, I was just thinking about using the Su family to catch up with King Yu. If it's gone, it's gone. There will always be opportunities in the future. As for Chun Wei, my father is not worried. The son has his own plans." At dusk, Qin Jiu was cooking medicine in the yard when she heard a knock on the door. "I'm coming." She quickly put down the things in her hands, walked to the door and opened it. The door opened, and a handsome-looking man stood outside. "Excuse me, is this Zhou Mingshen, Master Zhou's home?" "Master, master, are you my husband-in-law's student? At this time, he should be back from his stall soon." Lu He suddenly understood and bowed to Qin Jiu. It turned out to be Mrs. Zhou. She once received the teachings of Master Zhou in Liu He. "Mr. Lu, you're welcome." "Madam, I'm back." Zhou Mingshen's voice sounded from behind Lu He. He turned around and looked at Zhou Mingshen. The moment he saw Lu He's appearance, Zhou Mingshen's face turned pale instantly. It was just blocked by Liu He, so Qin Jiu didn't notice it at all. "How did you come?" Zhou Mingshen's voice was trembling. Lu He smiled, with a cold look in his eyes. "Master Zhou, your wife is here, why don't we go outside and talk?" "Good." Zhou Mingshen closed his eyes for a moment and waited to adjust his expression before stepping forward and handing the thing in his hand to Qin Jiu. "Madam, Lu He and I have something to discuss. If you are hungry, eat first." "I'm not hungry, I'll wait for you to come back." Qin Jiu didn't notice Zhou Mingshen's weirdness. She watched the two people leaving before turning around and entering the yard. There were some children playing by the river. The atmosphere between the two became increasingly silent. "What are you looking for me for?" "Master Zhou, what happened earlier?" "Lu He, you and I know exactly what happened at that time. You don't have to pretend like this outside of me." When Zhou Mingsheng thought of what happened at that time, his blood surged. At that time, at the request of the dean, Zhou Mingsheng became the youngest master of Kaiming Academy. Zhou Mingsheng knew that at his age, some people would be dissatisfied if he became the master of his peers. But he didn't expect that among the students of Kaiming Academy, there would be someone like Lu He. At first, he was completely unaware of Lu He's thoughts. Beguiled by Lu He's appearance, Zhou Mingsheng thought Lu He was a person who had the same interests as him. But in the end, he was framed by Lu He and had no choice but to leave Kaiming Academy. In the end, he set up a street stall and did calligraphy and painting, so that he could barely support his family. If it weren't for Qin Jiu taking advantage of him, Zhou Mingsheng doesn't know how long he could last. And the person who started all this actually dared to appear in front of him now. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 159. Chapter 159 Mother Liu's illness. Faced with Zhou Mingshen's anger, Lu He was exceptionally calm. As if the anger was not directed at him. "Master, why are you so angry? This matter is over, isn't it?" "Past." Zhou Mingsheng frowned and stared at Liu He. Suddenly, he sneered, "Lu He, are you heartless or cold-hearted? I have nothing to talk about with you. Isn't it too arbitrary for Master Zhou to say that there is nothing to talk about before he has even heard what I have to say?" Lu He looked calm and remained calm. The more he acted like this, the angrier Zhou Mingsheng became. But Zhou Mingsheng did nothing, just didn't want to say more, turned around and left. "I heard that your wife is pregnant. What are you up to?" Zhou Mingsheng suddenly stopped and looked towards Liu He. His eyes were full of vigilance. "Master Zhou, do you have the patience to listen to what I have to say?" Lu He's smile deepened a little, and he walked forward on his own. Zhou Mingsheng stood there, struggling for a long time, and finally followed. There are gradually fewer people around. "Lu He, if you don't say anything anymore, I will go back." "Master Zhou, why are you so anxious?" Lu He could see Zhou Mingsheng's impatience and stopped. "Master Zhou, in a few days, it will be spring." "So what?" Master Zhou, would you like to do me a favor? Zhou Mingsheng trembled when he met Lu He's snake-like cold eyes. After hearing Lu He's request, Zhou Mingsheng was unable to react. What are you thinking, Master Zhou? Lu He was not in a hurry and asked again. Zhou Mingsheng recovered from the shock and said, Lu He, are you crazy? I can't help you. Master Zhou, don't refuse so quickly. Lu He patted Zhou Mingsheng's shoulder and whispered beside him, after all, there is still a lot of time before spring, Master, you can think about it slowly, and it won't be too late to give me an answer. After saying that, Lu He let go of his hand and walked past Zhou Mingsheng. After a long time, Zhou Mingsheng returned home in a daze. Seeing his appearance, Qin Qiu quickly stepped forward and pulled him into the house. Touching Zhou Mingsheng's cold hands, Qin Qiu quickly dipped a towel in hot water and wiped his fingers to warm them up. Mr. Xianggong, that young master from Liu he. Don't mention him. Zhou Mingsheng's suddenly raised voice startled Qin Qiu. She looked at Zhou Mingsheng blankly, not knowing what was happening. Xiaoxiu, I'm a little tired. I want to rest alone for a while. Zhou Mingsheng closed his eyes, unable to hide the tiredness on his face. Qin Qiu felt very distressed and said, My lord, you have a good rest. I will heat the food in the pot. If you are hungry, go and eat by yourself. After saying that, she stood up and left. Just remember to put out the candles for Zhou Mingsheng before leaving. The room became dark. Zhou Mingsheng sat by the bed for a long time, not knowing what he was thinking. The next day, Sulayun calculated the effectiveness of Lu Qin's medicine and went to visit Liu's house. Lu Qin does not need to marry Suzian, so the Lu family no longer has anyone to look after her. When they arrived at Lu Qin's yard, Lu Mu and Lu Qin were basking in the sun outside the house. Akin. Leun. Seeing Sulayun, Lu Qin immediately stood up and went to greet him. The eyes were full of joy. May. Sulayun shook his head and stopped Lu Qin's words. Since Liu's mother is still here, it's better not to mention the Su family's affairs. Lu Qin reacted and pulled Sulayun toward the house. Mom, I want to chat with Leun for a few words, okay? You go in. Mother Lu was naturally happy to see that Lu Qin had a good friend. He did not enter the house with the two of them, but still sat outside. Lu Qin closed the door and pulled Sulayun to sit down. Leun, what is going on with the Su family? She didn't dare to ask any more questions, fearing that Lu He would find out. Sulayun briefly explained the matter, but did not mention Xiao Shenjiao. Lu Qin took a breath. She didn't expect that her marriage would turn out like this. Li Yun, I really want to thank you this time. She looked at Sulayun gratefully, with tears in her eyes. Since it's a thank you, then when you get back to Lin Mansion, you'll have to spend more time to make the picture of hundreds of birds facing the phoenix. Sulayun laughed. Lu Qin nodded heavily. You rest for a few days, I'll do it. That's not necessary. It's only a month and a half before the Queen Mother's birthday banquet. Mrs. Lin has been very nervous since you haven't been here these days. This painting of hundreds of birds paying homage to the phoenix to be presented to the Queen Mother is not just a birthday gift. It is even more important to show the strength of Dashan dynasty. On the day of the Queen Mother's birthday banquet, the surrounding tributary countries will come to congratulate her. This is why Mrs. Lin is so nervous. The rash on my face should be gone tomorrow, and I can go back and continue to sew the picture of hundreds of birds facing the phoenix. As he said this, Lu Qin thought of something. Li Yun, why did the pills you gave me before become like this, the miraculous effect? Doctors can't even tell if it's true or false. Sulayun smiled and replied, it's more like poison than medicine. Poison. Lu Qin didn't quite understand, but he didn't panic much. Even if it is poison, she is not worried at all. Ahem. The sound of Liu's mother's heart-rending coughing could be heard outside the house. Lu Qin's face tightened and she hurriedly ran out. Mother. Lu Qin helped Lu Mu and asked the maid to go and ask for the doctor. Sulayun put a hand on the side and helped Lu Mu to the bed. Before the doctor came, Sulayun took Mother Liu's pulse first. Lu Qin looked confused when he saw Sulayun's actions, but he didn't ask. Looking at Sulayun's increasingly gloomy face, Lu Qin asked worriedly, "Layun, what's the problem?" Before Sulayun could answer, the doctor had already arrived. "Miss Lu, your father's health is a little worse. It's better to stay in bed and rest." It was still the same explanation as before. Lu Qin didn't know how many times he had heard it. Lu Mu's illness was acquired. Liu's father and Liu's mother are both from the same village, and their families are not very wealthy. Liu's mother's family is even poorer. Liu's mother has helped the family with work since she was a child. She would get up early and work late at night, working in the fields in the summer and in the water in the winter. She got pregnant at a young age. Problems. Later there was a flood in her hometown, and Lu Mu was soaked in the water for 3 days and 3 nights before she was rescued. But it's also because my body is getting weaker. Later, when she married Liu's father and gave birth to Lu Qin, all her problems broke out. She was bedridden all day long, and the family's livelihood depended on Liu's father and Lu Qin. Lu Qin couldn't bear Mother Liu's pain, so in order to buy medicine for Mother Lu to treat her illness, she learned embroidery from an embroiderer and made money through embroidery. Later, Empress Dowager Lu Qin appreciated it, and the Lu family's life improved. Not only did he move to the capital, but he also had a big yard and servants at home. Everything is getting better, but Lu Mu's illness shows no sign of improvement. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 160. Chapter 160, Do you drink alcohol? The doctor was escorted out of the door by his servants. Looking at her mother on the bed, Lu Qin suppressed her pain, twisted the towel herself, and wiped it with her mother. Sulayun remained silent and only walked around Mother Liu's room. Then he stood in front of the table. There is also a glass of water on the table, which doesn't look like tea. Sulayun smelled it, then opened the teapot on one side, and found a few white ginseng slices floating in it. Then she realized that it was not tea, but ginseng tea. After pouring out a piece, Sulayun put the ginseng piece into his mouth and took a bite. Lu Qin wrung out the towel and put it away, then turned around and saw Sulayun's movements. "Liyun, that ginseng tea has gone cold. I'll have someone pour you another pot." "How many times has your mother drank this ginseng tea?" Sulayun put down the ginseng slices and asked. "The ginseng slices were brought by my aunt, probably 2 years ago. My aunt said that making ginseng tea for my mother to drink would relieve her pain. The doctor also said that drinking some ginseng tea would be good for my mother's health." Lu Qin noticed Sulayun's expression, his eyebrows twitched, and he felt something was wrong. Many wealthy families in the capital will prepare ginseng tea. There are a lot of people drinking, so why is Liyun so concerned? "Qiner." Lu Mu's weak voice came. Lu Qin hurriedly bent down to listen to Lu Mu's words. "Miss Su is a guest. Please take Miss Su out for a walk. Mom will be fine." Seeing Liu's mother's insistence, Lu Qin covered her with a quilt and took Sulayun out of the house. "Liyun, is there anything wrong with the ginseng tea? Don't let your mother drink this ginseng tea again." Sulayun's tone was a little deeper. If it were a normal ginseng slice, Mother Lu would indeed be good for her health, but the ginseng slice had been tampered with. Thinking of what Lu Qin just said, Sulayun was a little unsure. Why did Lu Qin's aunt, Lu Mu's sister, send problematic ginseng slices to Lu Mu? "Liyun, what's going on?" Lu Qin's heart was pounding. Could it be that her mother's illness was caused by ginseng tea? Looking at Lu Qin's expression, Sulayun knew that she was wrong and said, "Your mother's illness is not caused by ginseng tea. Years of hard work has accumulated a lot of coldness in your mother's body, so she is covered with hair even in summer. It's cold and can't warm up. That's true. Lucine was startled and blinked. Leun, do you know medical skills? Thinking about it like this, Lucine realized that the pill was not made by anyone else but Suleun. Suleun nodded, I have learned some. Most of the medicines prescribed by doctors to your mother are to dispel cold. Normally, taking them for a few years will have some effect, but you should have also discovered that your mother's illness is not a little sign of improvement. That's true, it was better in the past few years, but in the last 2 years. Halfway through speaking, Lucine paused. In the past 2 years, wasn't it the time when my mother started drinking ginseng tea? The ginseng slices seem to have been tampered with and have completely lost their tonic effect. The more your mother drinks, the slower her illness will heal. But my aunt brought it? How could Lucine believe it if her aunt wanted to harm her mother? Mother and aunt have always had a good relationship. After the Queen Mother appreciated it, they moved to the capital together. It's just that my aunt did not live with them, but bought a separate house outside. Perhaps even your aunt doesn't know. Suleun listened to Lucine's explanation and felt that if Lucine's aunt really did something, what was she planning? Take me to see the remaining ginseng. Okay, Lucine turned around and walked in one direction. These things are placed in the kitchen, and there are many people who can come into contact with them. Arrived in the kitchen, Lucine took down the small medicine jar from the shelf. Ginseng slices were not easy to store, so there were not many slices left in the jar. Took out the remaining ginseng slices and put them on the table. Suleun took a ginseng slice and took a bite. There is indeed a problem. It's just that you can't tell whether there was a problem before you got it or if it happened after you got it. Just as I was thinking about it, a maid came running outside. Miss, you are here. Miss Zhonglan is here. I know, I'll be there right away. After the maid left, Lucine frowned slightly and said, it's my aunt here. Counting the time, she probably brought ginseng slices. When Suleun heard this, he thought it was a coincidence and sent a new reference film, just in time to see what went wrong. Lucine also had the same idea. Leun, please wait a moment. I'll go over first and ask the maid to bring the ginseng slices. Suleun nodded and watched Lucine's figure go away. After a while, the maid who came to report earlier ran over. What else is in hand? Miss Su, the lady asked me to give you the ginseng slices. The maid handed the ginseng slices to the front, then quickly took the hotcakes from the kitchen drawer and sent them to the front hall. Suleun opened the oil paper and found a dozen ginseng slices neatly placed inside. As soon as he smelled it, Suleun knew it in his mind. There is something wrong with this ginseng slice. In other words, it was Lucine's aunt who really did something. But why? After a while, the maid from before came back again. Ms. Su, she said it will take a while for her to get better, so let me take you out first. It's okay, I know the way. Suleun didn't ask the maid to give it away, but just left a message for Lucine. After leaving Liu's house, Lian Xian was waiting beside the carriage. Miss, how is Miss Liu doing now? It's much better. I think I can go to Lin Mansion tomorrow. Suleun got on the carriage, thought for a while, and didn't rush back. Instead, he asked the coachman to divert to the Sun Mansion. Sun Mansion. As soon as the housekeeper Lao Yang saw Suleun, his face broke out into a smile. The young lady is here, the master is in the study. He also deliberately lowered his voice as he spoke. Suleun didn't understand it at first, but when he reached the door of the study and smelled the aroma of wine inside, he realized what he was saying. They were drinking together with the old man behind her back. Suleun took a breath and knocked on the study door. Who? Grandpa's energetic voice came out. Grandfather, it's me. Suleun had a smile on his face and a very calm tone. There was a slight noise inside, and it soon fell silent again. After a while, Sun Xiao opened the door and touched his chin. Why is Yuner here? I just have some free time, so I'll come and see you. Sulayun went straight into the study. He could still smell the aroma of wine in his nose, but the scene in the study was clear and there was nothing related to wine. Sun Xiao coughed lightly. What are Yuner looking for? Grandpa, have you listened to me these past few days and stopped drinking? Of course. Sir, I remember not long ago. Lao Yang was muttering to the side, but Sun Xiao glared at him and silently opened his eyes and closed his mouth. End of this chapter.